Hello and welcome to the Cells and Tissues lecture. This will be one of the PowerPoints that I don't really go over too much in depth because it should be a review for you guys from anatomy and cell biology. So I'm going to just do a brief overview of the slides and I will use the pointer to point a few things out. But overall, this should just really be a review. If you do have any questions on this material, don't hesitate to contact me. So we have organs. Organs are made out of tissues. Tissues are made out of cells. And cell components include things like a plasma membrane and organelles, which we'll go over in this PowerPoint. Now, the membrane is very important to us, and we have a whole PowerPoint dedicated to the membrane. And it's really functional in terms of it allowing the cell to have a protective barrier. It isolates the inter and outer cellular fluids. It allows for communication between cells, and it allows for signaling between cells as well. Now, that membrane is called the cell membrane, also known as the plasma membrane, and it's made out of a few key ingredients: lipids, proteins, and carbohydrates. In this illustration on the left, you see lipids. These are phospholipids, and the membrane is made out of 2 layers of lipids. So we call it a phospholipid bilayer. Now, these lipids aren't just by themselves. They're actually mixed with a lot of other ingredients, as you can see here. In this illustration, the lipids are in purple. You've got cholesterol in yellow. In blue, you have proteins, and these hexagon-shaped structures are carbohydrates, like sugars. So everything has a function. The lipid bilayer is there to provide the basic structural support. Cholesterols provide a little bit more structure and integrity to the membrane. Proteins are used to allow for signaling, for anchoring of these little red lines, which are called the cytoskeleton, and they allow for transport in and out of a cell. And we have 2 names for those proteins. You have integral proteins. Integral proteins are ones that look like this blue one. They span inside and out of the membrane. Or you have peripheral proteins, and those types of proteins are the ones that are either only on the outside or only on the inside. The job of carbohydrates is to act as signaling molecules. They stick out almost like an antenna to allow for signaling. And we've got 2 types of carbohydrates. We've got glycoproteins and glycolipids. Anytime you see glyco, I want you to think sugar. So a glycoprotein is a sugar attached to a protein. So we got the sugar here, we've got a protein here. Glycolipid is a sugar attached to a lipid. So we've got the sugar here, and it's attached to these lipid legs here. We'll talk a lot more about the cell membrane in an upcoming PowerPoint. So this is your overall umbrella of what organelles you should know and the things that we're going to review over in this lecture. So you got the cell membrane, which we just barely touched on so far. You've got the nucleus, which holds DNA. And then inside, you've got this like jello-like material, which is in yellow, called the cytoplasm. And that cytoplasm is made out of cytosol, which is the jello-like material. It's full of membranous little organelles, which you need to know the functions of. It has little inclusions, which are really small. They're not considered organelles, but they do have very important functions in the cell. And you have proteins in the cell, which really make up the skeleton inside the cell and allow the cell to move, just how our human skeletons allow us to move. So the intracellular components consist of, again, that cytoskeleton, and there are 3 main types of cytoskeleton: microfilaments, microtubules, and intermediate filaments. Please make sure to go over these 3 with their definitions, as well as look at this slide. Do not worry about the diameter or the type of protein. All I'm really going to test you on is the function of those 3 types of cytoskeleton inside of the cell. Then you have the structures that are made up of specifically one type of cytoskeleton called the microtubule. If I go back one slide, you'll notice microtubules is one of the 3 types of cytoskeleton. These microtubules, the function allows you for movement with cilia or flagella, and they allow for intracellular transport. That means moving things back and forth inside the cell. The next slide that you already saw is what microtubules help you make. So the structure called a microtubule helps you build centrosomes, centrioles, cilia, and flagella. Again, all from cell bio, so please make sure to go over their names and functions. Now, that cytoskeleton, if I may draw for you here, you have a cell, and all through the cell you have this like skeleton-like structure, and it spans the entirety of the cell in different directions, and it allows you to move things from one place to another. So if you had a mitochondria here that you actually wanted to move to right here, that mitochondria cannot just on its own walk. This mitochondria needs to be attached to the cytoskeleton, and it needs to walk along the cytoskeleton until it gets to its final destination. Here it is zoomed in. Let's say this is that mitochondria. It's attached to the cytoskeleton using this thing here we call a motor protein. This is like your Uber. This is the taxi cab or the driver that grabs onto the organelle, grabs onto the microtubule, and it literally has two legs here. And it walks along the cytoskeleton until it moves the organelle to where it needs to be. Now, there are two types of motor proteins. One is called a kinesin, the other is called a dynein. Kinesins are more like this guy here. Kinesins are the type of motor protein that move vesicles, they move organelles, and any other kind of intercellular organelle that you have in the cell. Dyneins, however, which is not illustrated in this picture, is a type of motor protein. It looks very similar to this one, that moves cilia and flagella. These two are to move the entire cell. So a flagella would hang off the back of the cell, like a sperm. Cilia are little hairs that stick off the membrane of the cell, and their movement, it's like a swaying-like movement back and forth, allows the cell to propel forward, backward, any direction it wants. The next few slides I'm not going to go over. You should know these, but it is a review. There is a matching section on your next exam with the organelle name and its function. So make sure you know mitochondria, the smooth and rough ER, the Golgi body, also known as the Golgi complex or apparatus, the vesicles, you've got a few different types, storage vesicles, lysosomes, and peroxisomes, the nucleus, which holds DNA. You've also got the nucleolus, which is right in the middle, and that makes ribosomes. And then here is where I'm going to kind of walk through this with you. This is the production of proteins with the use of all of those organelles. So if you need to pause the video now, go ahead and pause it to go over those organelles before I go through this whole schematic. So if you're still watching, you know what the organelles do. Here's your nucleus with the DNA. To turn DNA into proteins, which we'll look at right over here, you must go through a process called transcription and translation. We will not go through the details of that too deeply in this class because you should have already gone over that in biology. Here are the basic steps. DNA gets turned into mRNA, and that happens in the nucleus. The mRNA leaves the nucleus and goes into the cytoplasm, and that's this green strand here. This mRNA will be held onto by ribosomes, and these ribosomes will read the mRNA sequence to help build the protein. Now, if you notice, these ribosomes actually come and attach to the ER. This is the rough ER. The ribosome reads the mRNA and at the same time builds the protein based on the mRNA sequence directly into the ER. The job of the ER is to fold that protein into the correct folded shape and then ship that protein into the Golgi. So this partially folded protein will go into the Golgi body, and it'll start moving through the pancake-like structures of the Golgi body. And as it moves down, it's going to be modified, it's going to be tagged, and it's going to be placed into a secretory vesicle to be shipped to the correct location. Now, proteins can be shipped out of a cell. They can stay in the cell to be used in the cell as well. The step-by-step is right here on the right side, so make sure you go over it. Do not worry about this whole section. You can just go ahead and cross that out. Now, tissue types, this for sure is a review from anatomy. You've got 4 main tissues: epithelium, connective tissue, muscles, and nerve tissue. The first one we're going to go over is epithelium, and there's just a few things I want to point out here to you just in case you didn't go over this in anatomy. Epithelium, like your skin, the internal or external lining of your body, is made up of cells that are held together side by side. And they're held together side by these structures called junctions. There are a few different types of junctions. We've got gap junctions, we have tight junctions, and anchoring junctions. These 3 junctions are the 3 you must know, and you must know their function. So we're going to go over them right now. The first kind of junction is a gap junction. The gap junction is literally what the name says. You've got 1 cell here, you've got 1 cell here, and it creates a tunnel-like structure between the 2 cells. That is your gap junction. It is a gap, it's like a hole in between the cells, allowing for cytoplasm to move back and forth. But nonetheless, it is a junction because it's connecting this pink plasma membrane to this pink plasma membrane. Please know the name of this junction and what protein is made out of. It is made out of a protein called a connexin protein. The next kind of junction is called a tight junction. And tight junctions are going to be just like the name states. They're junctions that really hold the plasma membranes tightly together. They don't allow any movement back and forth or in between. The names of these proteins are called claudins and occludins. And the last one, the most complex one, is called a desmosome. The desmosomes are complex and they have a pretty strong hold in between 2 neighboring cells, and that's because of their connection with the cytoskeleton. So here's the plasma membrane there, and there's a plasma membrane right there. Inside each of the cells, you have this blue structure called a plaque. It is made out of sugar and protein. This plaque is connected to the cytoskeleton you see in red here. And the specific type of cytoskeleton you connect to is the intermediate filament. Remember, there's 3 types of cytoskeleton. Intermediate filament is one of them. This plaque connects to the intermediate filaments that go deep into the neighboring cells, and it connects to these purple structures that actually bind together in the middle. They're like almost interwoven. That is called a cadherin protein. So you have the cell membrane. It has the plaque on the inside. The plaque is connected to the intermediate filament and the cadherins in between the cells to allow for a nice, strong connection. They are called anchoring junctions because if I had a cell here and I had a cell here, here was my plaque, here was my plaque. That plaque is connected to all the intermediate filaments that go deep down into the cell. So you've got a nice anchor deep into the core of the cell. And then they connect together using those cadherin proteins across the middle of the cells. So 3 types of cell connectors, and they have their own names for the proteins that I need you to know. 5 types of epithelium. I'm going to let you guys go through this on your own. This is a review, and if it's not, no problem. I gave you the name of the epithelium and the function of it along with a picture. So go ahead and go through exchange epithelium, transporting epithelium, ciliated epithelium, protective epithelium, and secretory epithelium. The next cell structure that we have are glands. We have endocrine glands and exocrine glands. Anytime you see the word endocrine, I want you to think hormones. Endocrine glands, this pink structure here, that's an endocrine gland. They secrete hormones directly into your blood vessel. Almost all endocrine glands have a blood vessel running right through the middle of them because the point of an endocrine gland is to make the hormone and put it right into your blood to travel throughout the rest of your body. The exocrine gland, however, could be a variety of secretions. Exocrine glands create a secretion here and allow that secretion to exit out of an opening This opening could be an opening that goes into your stomach, into your intestines, out of your pores. So an exocrine gland includes things like the enzyme glands in your digestive system, salivary glands in your mouth, mucus glands all throughout your esophagus. It includes sweat glands, which are all over your body. So these glands are found in your armpit and they open up to the external environment, so the armpit region. So this is a very, very diverse type of gland. And then we've got connective tissues. Again, this is a review of anatomy. Please make sure to go over this. These pictures should be identical to what was in your anatomy lab manual. So you've got loose connective tissue, dense connective tissue, bones and cartilage, adipose tissue, blood, which takes us to the next type of cell called the muscle cell. If you recall, the 3 types of muscle cells you have are cardiac, smooth, and skeletal. I've given you some primary differences between them. We see the striations in skeletal and cardiac. We see the intercalated discs in the cardiac muscle. We see that smooth muscle doesn't have striations, but it is a very long spindle-like shaped cell. Make sure you know the 3 types of cells, primary differences, and where they're found. And the last type of cell is called a neuron. The neuron is an excitable cell. It transmits electricity, and it's found in your nervous system. You've got the cell body, dendrites, you got the axon, and you've got the myelin sheath covering it. So again, this is going to be found in places like your brain, your spinal cord, and your peripheral nerves. So I did go through this fast, but it's because I'm not specifically lecturing on this, because it should be a review. It is on your exam. Be sure that you spend time on this. But it's not a whole lot of physio on here. It just helps prep you to understand the language of the physiology when I explain it. Go ahead and email me if you have any questions. Otherwise, stay tuned for the next video.